So happy to get Bentley Systems to do a presentation on from document to data to model-centric. I'm very curious what they have to say on that one. Let's give the floor to Olly and to Live. They're doing a dual presentation, and one of them is in the UK and the other one in the US. So let's see how that's going to work out. So guys, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for doing this webinar. And after the session, we will have a short Q&A. So that's for the people on the call. And again, welcome and thanks.
Thank you. Just to check, I'll check with one of you. You can hear me, right? Everybody can hear.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name's Olly Long. I'm a senior consultant here at Bentley Systems. I have experience working for engineering companies and as an information manager and other IT companies in the past. With me is Leif Johnson, also a senior consultant and very experienced in implementing the product we call Alim, and we'll talk about that product in a minute. So the agenda for today, I'm going to talk myself, probably about 2/3 of it, so sorry about that, but you will hear from Leif for another third. I'm going to start with what we call the one information management philosophy, and that is really the main part of the document to data world. Then we'll move on. It will be rude not to explain some of our products from Bentley Systems, and that is the Bentley's AssetWise lifecycle information management tool called Alim. Then I'm going to describe what we call Masto, a template on top of Alim, and what it aims to do. And then we're going to look toward the future, and that's going to be the model-centric working. So I'll get cracking. This is we've already done a few tests, and we found the presentation's about 40 minutes. There's going to be a point in time when I do need to hand over a presentation to Leif, and that's obviously going to be an ideal time for questions. If you do have some questions and you don't want to say them out loud, you by all means put them in the conversation box, and whoever is not presenting between myself and Leif, we can answer those. Okay. So, one information management. As I said, this is a philosophy, and at the end, hopefully you'll get an idea as to where we believe the world should be going. So here we have a imaginary project, or even a existing facility and a brownfield project that started. You have an engineering discipline at the top. Maybe it's your own discipline if you're an operator, or an engineering company, an EPC. And at the end of the project or during the project, they need to hand over information. Now, the common approach, and still these days, is to hand over documents. And when I talk about documents, a majority of them tends to be the non-intelligent type, the PDFs and the data sheets. Now, with a project that only hands over documents, you have one big disadvantage, is the fact that operations, certainly in the last X number of years, really rely upon data. All of their systems are data systems, and therefore to get that data from the document, all that information, is incredibly painful. So they would load all their documents into their document management system and go through this exercise of manually obtaining all the data from them and then placing it into their operational systems. Now, this is not ideal for many reasons. It takes a lot of time, number one, often meaning it's late, and it's prone to many errors. So moving from what was, to be fair, a database system in engineering through documents back to database really makes no sense at all. So here's another way of looking at the problem that's faced when the documents come into operations. Here is a matrix. Moving up the vertical side is asking the question, is the information I'm looking for exist, or does it actually ring true? Is it quality information? Along the horizontal is, can I actually find the information that I need? Now, where you don't want to be is that bottom left-hand box. And as we so commonly see when document-centric world of handover, what happens is we end up in this bottom left-hand world within operations. Now, I think it's fair to say that we've perfected the document-centric handover and we're moving towards that top right, but we will never properly enter into the green, perfect scenario where all information is to hand in operations and it can be found. So many of the answers to this question is, well, let's just add the data management discipline. We have an information management discipline already, which is made up of mainly just document management. Let's just tag on data management. Now, in theory, this works very well. If we go back to this diagram, we hand over not just the documents, but we also hand over a data set as well. Again, the diagram improves. The data gets placed into a centralized store, and all the information, including the data, gets passed through to the operational systems, like condition monitoring systems and maintenance systems like SAP. Now, of course, the benefits are quite clear. You don't have to do any of the manual intervention from documents. It reduces the number of errors that are made, and what's really nice is that when you start handing over data, you can start automating the identification of incorrect data and validate it, and therefore start collaborating much more with your engineering contractor. And that is something we'll talk about later, but collaboration is something that we're keen to introduce more of and move away from contractual obligations like formal handovers. But there is still a problem. The problem is with this idea of just adding the data discipline. And here is a classic example. This was from a real-life project. Obviously, we've changed the name of the company and the project, but the numbers are correct and the actual statistics are correct. So if we imagine what I call the gas mine project by a famous company called Gas Oil, very original, that define a strict document handover control. A lot of the information is handed over. In fact, the information in the document is very good because the review process on that document was excellent. Now, the IM team also requested, and specifically the data discipline, as they were separate from document discipline, requested a final XML file full of data. The problem is that what got obtained right at the end of the project was only found to be 30% complete, i.e. only 30% of the data was there. They didn't physically have enough time to go back to the contractor and say, look, you need to fill all this information in. It was too late and too soon. Now, within operations, because they need that information, they found the data to be unreliable, inconsistent, and therefore they had to spend again the $25 million scraping all the information on documents to get that complete data set. So if we look at a graph here, along the blue line is how the documents came in during a project. This is the handover of documents and the review cycle, finding the information to get better and better as the project progressed. However, though, with the document discipline, the data comes in far later, and because they don't have time to sort the information out and review it, it only ends up being 30 to 40% complete. So, this idea of just adding data management, adding data management as a discipline on top of document management, really what you're doing is just pushing that just a little bit into the green space. The information is still not high enough quality and it's still difficult to find. So, and this is where we talk about what I perceive as the One Information Management Initiative or philosophy. I think we'll all agree, and what I'll explain there, the data is the backbone of operational systems. It is not documents. Documents really are only there for reference and are mainly used by engineering to check some of the engineering information on the plant. It is not the day-to-day operational information. And the separation between documents and data, and I'm talking about at a vertical company level between the disciplines, causes a major damage to information quality and consequences. And to see it in a different way and ask the challenging question, if documents really are just containers for data, why do we split the disciplines into two? Why do we have a document management discipline separate from data? And if data and documents are just the same information, why do we actually choose to use separate systems? So where we see information management to go, and this idea of not keeping the separation between the two, a data repository here on the left with files coming in, just being reviewed and validated by information management, alongside a document repository with engineering review, this is where we see the problem. Where we want to be going is a single information management system where engineering and IM review together the entire information submission data set. And I'm talking about both documents and data all together in one submission. So, we've talked about this idea of just adding the data philosophy, not getting into the green space. With the One Information Management idea. The idea of a totally data-centric view, all information being stored in the same system, heavily moves you into that green area. And that's not the end. I'll show you in a minute how we can move even further into that green area. But I talked earlier about this idea of the one system, the system that contain both the data and the documents, and in fact reflect much better the plant, and that's the AssetWise Alim product. Now at this point I'll ask some questions. I'm going to hand over to Leif Johnson, who's going to talk about the AssetWise Alim product. So while I'm doing that, any questions about what has been shown there?
Denny here, a question. Have you seen examples of organizations, and you don't have to mention any specific names, that are more mature than others? And if so, are they the bigger companies, the smaller companies? Is it national oil companies? Which ones are doing better than others, and why?
Yes, definitely. I'd say the bigger oil and gas operators tend to be more mature than the smaller ones. And even within those, let's say the top 5, there's still a very large variance. I think where we've seen a real coming together of the knowledge and improvement is with things like the CFOS initiative, which is just an initiative at the moment, not a standard, but yet there's a lot of sharing and people moving up the ranks, if you like, within understanding information management there. But there's definitely a difference between them, operators. Yeah.
Thanks. Hopefully others have some questions too, and otherwise, of course, they can drop them in the chat.
While we're waiting for questions, can everyone see the screen as we switched presenters?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yes, I can.
Okay, well, if there are no questions, I'll go ahead and proceed. And for this part of the presentation, I wanted to cover the AssetWise Alim application, which is Alim, of course, being Asset Lifecycle Information Management. And really, as we're talking, Olly mentioned, going from document-centric to data-centric, and as such, that data is stored in a lot of different systems. You have your document repository that has all your documentation, such as your engineering documents, design drawings, your specifications, maintenance manuals, and so on. But you also have different operational systems that do specialized functions, and they do them very, very well. You have purchasing, your ERP, and other applications that are purchasing and so on that have information and reliance on your asset data, but all this information is in disparate systems and stored in their own repositories. The problem being that you have plenty of data now, but there's no way to access it. So as Olly showed in the one diagram, you start to build up your data, but if you have no way to find it and no way to cross-reference it, it becomes a silo. And the idea to try and join all these systems together really isn't feasible. So even if you create a digital asset without a way to tie those systems together, you really don't have a full picture of what you're trying to accomplish. So what AssetWise Alim does is it creates a digital twin of the reality or the real world, right? So you have your physical plant and you have your digital plant. And the idea is you need to keep the digital plant in sync with what's out in the physical plant, right? So by doing this, what we do is we provide links to the information, or we synchronize the information between these systems. We don't take ownership of it, because those specialty systems do what they do, and they do it very, very well. But through this single interface, or this common data environment, we can see the impact because we're aware of all that information, right? So at this point, AssetWise Alim sits in the middle, points to the other information, as well as provides contextual relationships between that information, regardless of what other system it may reside in. So here we see a little bit about the information modeling. So we're going to talk a lot about modeling, and modeling means more than just your design model or your 3D model or your designs. It really talks about the information and how to contextually relate it to each other. So you see here different types of information. We have information about people, documentation, the physical assets, change packages or projects, and so on. And depending on your responsibility or your job function, you might be looking at information in a totally different way, in a totally different context than somebody else with a different function. So the nice thing here is you'll notice that all these relationships between the information are bidirectional. So if I go in looking at a requirement, I can see what assets it relates to and all of that. And the benefit there being, if I have a change, then I can see the impact of that change because I know the relationships, again, regardless of what other specialty system it relies in. So we're breaking down the silos of information and we're making that accessible. Now, if I'm asset-centric, say I'm out in the field and I'm going to do work on a particular piece of equipment, I can do a search for that asset now, and then I see the documentation. So if I'm looking for a maintenance manual, or if I'm looking for an operational specification, or if I'm actually filling out an inspection report or documenting the condition, I can access the information that way. And same thing from a project management standpoint. I can go in and look at the project and see all the relationships there as well. So the important thing to understand is now we're showing the information in context. You're not just seeing a small portion of the picture, you're getting the higher level view. So when we look at ALIM, what we're looking at are two primary areas of management. So we have the management of the information itself, and we have the management of the business processes. So when we look at about information, we look at document control and records management. So all your documentation, and some of those documents might be records. You have certain retention periods associated with them, a disposition, whether you're moving it to offsite storage or destruction dispositions because you only want to maintain those records for a certain amount of time based on regulatory compliance. We provide tools to manage that information. Same thing with your data. So if you have your tag or your functional location information, we provide visibility into that and management of that information, all the data around that. So say, for example, you have a tag for a pump, we can manage the information or the attribution associated with that pump, operational pressures, and then we can also go all the way down to the serial number that's installed at that location. Model management. Now again, modeling has more to do with than just your CAD design drawings, right? But that's an important piece of it. And we add intelligence to that model layer. So not only do we get the information model of the relationships between the information, but we allow you to access that information directly through the 3D content or the 3D view. So you can visualize this graphically, select on an asset, and view all the data around that asset through that visual layer. And this is something that we'll be showing here in a few minutes to where you can see how we can leverage both CAD information as well as doing either laser scan or what we call context capture, where we build a 3D model of the data, and you'll see that here in a little bit. Also, another layer of information is the spatial information, the geographical location of the asset, and being able to locate that information on a map, whether it's a point on a map or a linear network, such as a road network or a rail network. So we manage that information as well, and you'll see an example of that in a few minutes as well. Now, when we talk about business processes, you need to be able to manage the information and be able to route that information, whether it's routing it through a review and approval process, sending out transmittals for review with outside contractors or subcontractors, and managing RFI processes and so on. As I said earlier, we have to manage the configuration, right? So if you have a digital representation, the digital plant, and you have the physical plant, in order to maintain the configuration, in other words, in order to maintain that the digital representation is accurate and current, you need to have procedures in place to manage change. constant is change, right? So every time you make a change, you need to be able to facilitate that, identify the affected objects, and then reconcile that information when the change is completed. On top of this is activity scheduling, whether you're sending somebody out in the field to do an inspection or you're sending out for some sort of work in the field, you need to be able to schedule that. So there's calendar capabilities and scheduling and making sure things are done on time. Activities such as inspections, go out and capture that inspection, tie it to the asset that you're looking at, and being able to find that later and be able to identify the condition. The condition also gives you the ability to overlay additional information such as operational information from some, monitoring applications such as your SCADA systems, and being able to overlay that as well. And then of course requirements. You have requirements that say what is allowed to be in the field, and you need to make sure you're in compliance to those requirements. And then also specifications. So we're going to show an example here in a demonstration of how to manage specifications and tie the specific paragraphs or line item requirements in that to the physical asset. So when we look at the interface, you can see that it's a tile-based interface, and it's based on what you're trying to accomplish. So think of it as like a task-based interface. So today we're going to show a couple snippets of demonstrations where we show a little bit on the documents, creating a new document, running it through a workflow. We'll highlight the work exchange where we go in and we see what's assigned to us, when it needs to be completed, and actually tracking the audit trail when those tasks are completed. We'll touch on assets, so the creation of a new asset and seeing how the attribution for that asset is dependent upon what type of class of object it is. And then we'll also tie into records management very briefly, and so on. So let's go ahead and start looking at document management. So in this case, I'm going to start the video, and we're going to create a new document. And when we create a new document, the first thing we're going to see is the selection for what type of document are we creating. In this case, I'm going to select a specification, and depending on the type of object that you're creating, the attribution can be unique. In this case, it's pretty plain, but you're going to see here in the subsequent demonstration that as we select different classes of objects, we have a pretty substantial set of attribution that is class specific. As we add the information, we'll go ahead and save our changes, and once we've created this document, we're going to go ahead and upload a file to associate with that document. Once we've done that, what we're going to see is a workflow has been instantiated upon creation of that document. You can see a preview of that in the upper left-hand corner, where the first task in the workflow is to create, but we also see the subsequent task is to review. So you get a little bit of a preview of the workflow, and down below you can view the instructions of the specific task we're on, which tells us to fill out the document information and attach the file. Since I've just done that, I'm going to close that task, and down below I can complete that task to send it to the next step in the workflow. It's already configured to go to a specific skill or role, such as the document controller, which is a group of users, but I can also select an individual user if I'd like. In addition, I can add additional task instructions, and once I complete this, the next user, or the group of users in this case, is going to receive an email notification that there's a task pending. And you can see in the preview we're now on the review task. Because I'm a member of the document controller skill, I could actually accept that task and continue on. For demonstration purposes, we could do that. And if we look at the workflow itself, we see the individual tasks. And that create document task is completed. And you can see who completed it and when they accepted that task. If we go to the work exchange now, because I'm a member of the document controller skill, I can see in the inbox tasks that are assigned to me as an individual, but in the upper right hand corner I can actually look at the skills that I'm assigned to view their inboxes. So if we look at the document controller skill, we're going to see that we have that task for that document I just created to review it. And I also have other tasks that I can accept as needed. If I look in the work in progress, these are tasks that I've already accepted, and in this case I'm going to focus on the specification 4, and this is a task that I'm already working on and I've already started creating some comments on. So just like before, I can see the workflow up in the upper right-hand corner. I can view the instructions, but I also can go through and view the comments. And because I've already started this review, I can see that I've already made a decision. If I want to view the details, I can expand. And then here I can see the comments that I've added. And because I've already completed this review, I'm going to complete this task, and I'm going to send it off to the next step, which is a sign-off that's assigned to the manager skill. So once I do this, the manager is going to get an email notification, and they will be able to complete that task. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to log out as the document controller, and I'm going to log back in as the manager. And rather than using the work exchange, now in the email I would have a direct link to this, but let's say I came in later and I want to do a search. So this is a simple search. I can just start typing in the text, and it will automatically start populating the list based on what I've already typed in. If I select that spec 4, you can see that again it's at the sign off task, and you see I have the option to accept that task. If I view the workflow, again I see the audit trail. I can see that task that I just completed, but I can also view this graphically. Now of course this is a very simple workflow. It's just a linear process, but this could be as complex as your business processes demand. So it could be a very involved parallel review process or nested workflows to different disciplines. In this view, I also can see the due date of each task. I can see which task it's on, and I can see which task is forthcoming. So what we've shown in this short demonstration is the ability to create a new document, have it automatically associated with a business process for review and approval, and how we track that through the workflow. Okay. Next, I'm going to show the records management, and this one goes very quick, so I'm going to try and pause this. So let's just take a quick look. So I selected the records management tile, and in the records management tile I see all the records that are pending disposition, whether it's a move disposition to offsite storage or a destruction disposition. And it's important to understand, if you notice, that we have copies. For each document I can have multiple copies or multiple files associated with it. So in a design application, I might have the master, which is the native file, but I might have secondary copies such as a published PDF that I send out for review or out in a construction work package. So I can control which type of copies, and the dispositions can be specific to that type of copy. If I go through and I run the disposition schedule, that'll update that list, and I can go ahead and select which records I want to process. So in this case, you can see I'm selecting a couple master copies on these documents, and I'm selecting this secondary copy for this design drawing. So we're going to process these records, and the way we do that is we select them and we create a disposition order. So I can create a new one or add it to an existing one, add the information, and once I've done this, it can then be sent off for review and approval to actually run the disposition. So once we do that, we see it's not approved. I submit it for approval, and the reviewer gets the email notification. Going on, I can also do an ad hoc notification if I'd like to notify another individual, so I'll go ahead and do that. And you can see I can do this for any record or any object in the system to give anyone a heads up or let them know and add any instructions. And once I've done this, we're going to go ahead and log out and log back in as the person who's actually going to run the disposition. So you can see here, this is the email notification. You can see there's a hyperlink directly to that object in the system. And we see those 3 records. So you can see if I accept this and approve it, those records are dispositioned. And if I go to that secondary copy that we were just talking about, you'll see that if I navigate to the master still exists, but if I go to the copy per that disposition order, that copy has been destroyed. So that's records management. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about assets, and this will highlight the example of the attribution based on the class. So if I select an asset class to create, you can see I have a certain set of attribution. If I select a different class, you'll see the attribution updates, and we'll do this one more time for a service crossing. You can see additional attribution. Let's go ahead and do a search for an asset. We're just going to type in a wildcard. I wouldn't recommend searching your entire repository like this, but for a demo data set, that's acceptable. We'll go ahead and select the bridge, And a couple things to note, you'll see the attribution that's associated with this asset. I can view any locational information associated with this. We have activities such as appraisals, assessments, and so on. The actual condition of the asset, so I can identify any defects or current conditions. And then finally, the associated documentation. So in this case, I can see the approval documents that are associated with it. And notice I have links to that information. Also note on the upper left-hand side here, we can see that we have a hierarchical view of the asset structure. And if I would expand the Waterloo Bridge, I see it's made up of 4 spans, and I can drive deeper into that hierarchy to see the caissons and so on that go in to make up that bridge. So at this point, I've talked pretty much nonstop, so I'm going to pause for a moment to see if there are any questions with what we've shown so far. And while I'm paused, I'm going to stop presenting and hand control back over to Olly.
Well, thanks for that part of the presentation and also the demonstration of it. I hope that there are people on the call that have some questions. And again, if you are a bit shy, just type it in the chat pane. If there aren't any questions, let's continue.
Okay, check that everybody can hear me and you can see my screen. Should be saying specifications management.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a short demonstration of what we call a specification management service. It's a sort of a plug-in or add-on to the Alim application. It allows you to store specifications within Alim. And within the actual specification, or the requirements document itself, you can then link to objects that already exist in Alim. So therefore, most important, linking existing documents that are referenced in there, or linking tags themselves. From the application, you can link to an existing tag, or even create a tag that isn't created already. Now moving on to really what is the start into what we call the model-centric view. I'm sure most of you are used to, with certainly asset management systems, this ability to understand where the tag is in your system and therefore just search for it using advanced search capabilities. But here we're looking at it slightly differently. Here we're starting this idea of a model-centric view and just starting it with what we call the spatial element to it. This is our spatial delivery within the AssetWise Alim tool. And yes, I realize this is a road, but this could quite easily be an onshore oil and gas plant, refinery, or an oil gas pipeline. Here we're going to look at the pipework, the wastewater pipework that surrounds a freeway or a highway. And here we're selecting all the layers that we want to see, the outfalls, the outlets, and the different layers that are available. You can turn them on, turn them off, and even decide how they're shown as the legend that appears there. The background map can be chosen as well. At the moment we're just seeing an OpenStreetMap, but that could be a satellite picture or so on. Again, the normal geometric functionality exists, the ability to zoom, ability to search certain areas, to pan, and select whatever exists there. Here there are assets by using a rectangular or polygon shape. So here you can see that within that rectangle that was chosen, there's all kinds of different assets, from catch pits, gullies, and pipe work that exists within there. You can pick up and say exactly where that location exists, or you can decide to link very quickly into AssetWise itself, because everything exists within AssetWise. All of this geometric data is stored within the Alim product itself. It is not referenced from elsewhere, it's stored within it. Here we're actually showing the legend being different, using different colors to be able to show different conditions and so on. And you can see there he's now linked within the AssetWise product to see the attribution of that given asset. And lastly, of the demo videos, I want to talk about a bit about reporting, as it's now become a real flexible and powerful arena within Alim. Within Alim, you have the ability to write your own ad hoc reports in a simplistic view, but we now have a unique integration with SSRS and Power BI, the two leading Microsoft reporting products, and we have our own, as part of our AssetWise suite, what we call Operation Analytics, which is a time series analytical system. And you'll see a bit later on an example of where we've used this time series data and run analytics on it to decide and make a decision about what to do next about a vessel. So that's the end of our demonstration on Alim. Now I want to talk about what we call Masto. AssetWise Alim, as I hope you've seen today, is a very powerful product, but it's a product that needs quite a lot of configuration to really meet the needs of an organization. On top of that, although the majority of the work is configuration, and we provide some excellent configuration tools, on top of AssetWise, we often find clients wish to customize the application, some of which meets the best practice of the given industry. MASFO stands for Managed Service Template for Operators. And when we mean operators, we're talking about plant operators, oil, gas, chemicals, and pharmaceutical. So MASFO, if you see this onion view of AssetWise with its configuration and maybe some customization on top, MASFO encapsulates all of that and also the customizations to deliver a single template that off the shelf as a service to provide. And the idea, as I said, is based upon the best practice that we've found from our clients and in the industry itself. It focuses within a philosophy as well. The idea is certainly for any kind of project work, we're trying to push this idea of collaboration rather than contract. And with that, this one information management philosophy. It focuses on all the areas of information management. As we've discussed before, one information management is not about separating the disciplines, it's bringing them all together to have the single information management tool set. So within the tool, and as you've seen for the videos, we have full document control capabilities, data management. What we haven't shown you yet is what we call asset management. That's understanding the models, the physical serialization item on them, and what is very, again, powerful, and is what Leif talked about a little bit, this idea of change management, creating change packages, encapsulating and understanding how assets relate to each other to ensure that changes are well managed on the site. On top of that, as you see these horizontals, we have the collaboration framework we talked about there, excellent integration interfaces, and underpinning it is a strict data information model and a reference data library that comes from, as I discussed before, the CFROS standard. Within it, again, is trying to push this information submission philosophy. This idea that data and documents don't come in separately, they come in a single package of information. And that information can be immediately picked up, it can be validated, viewed by the submitter, then kicked into a review process. And here's a couple of screenshots of that example within MASFO. The idea that an engineering register is part of that information submission. It's automatically picked up, automatically validated and marked up. It's shown to the submitter, asking him does he want to proceed. And once he does want to proceed, it then moves on into a review. So the reviewers can then see not just the documents, the P&IDs and data sheets, they can see the registers all marked up with any issues that have been found by an automated validation engine. Reporting is another key area, focusing on KPI reports like the completeness, data completeness, document turnaround performance, and so on. And also a unique idea called register export. We're sure an expert, I showed you an excerpt of a register that's come in, the idea that data can come in as a formalized registered document, but also the ability for the people who submit it to then take an export from the system to see exactly what information they have placed into the system and therefore work on the export itself. So that concludes MASTFO, and now we can move on from what I discussed earlier as one information management and where do we see the future going. And that at Bentley is what we call the model-centric view. And again, just as Leif explained earlier, is when we call models, we're not talking about just the 3D models that we're all used to, but we're talking about reality models, meshes, laser scans, photogrammetry, spatial, any way of visually understanding information. So if we go back to our famous diagram, as you see, the part that was left out was this idea of the graphics. Engineering provide a lot of graphical information, all digitized and all understood within their data systems, but that is very rarely handed over. And what we're proposing is the idea of handing over everything: the documents, the data, and the graphics. Now, the data is still the main thing that flows into the operational system, but with the graphics, it gets stored in the centralized Alim store. The data flows through in the operational systems, but the key to having the graphics there is because you've handed the entire information set over in its digital form, you're then able to reproduce the graphics again, given any changes that take place on the plant. So it means that you don't have to now go back to any contractors and ask them to redraw P&IDs, 3D models, and so on, as all the information is there along with the graphics to be able to recreate them and then pass them around, all in their digital format. What does that mean? It means all information is handed over now. You have a complete view of all information that took place during projects and handed over. Documents and drawings can now be reproduced even after the changes that occur on the plant, and therefore the cost of information is now reduced. The act of handing over documents and data increases cost. It costs more with the more data. Information costs money, but when you hand over graphics, you can now reduce the cost because it is usually money that you spend asking your contractors to redraw the documents. And it also brings this possibility onto the model-centric view and what we call visual operations. Now, I talked earlier, I talked over a short demo of our spatial capabilities. That maybe just touches on the idea of visual operations, but really what visual operations is the understanding that you don't have to search for data and information just by typing in a piece of text. What we can do is bring in very easily into even the operational phase three-dimensional models, and therefore use them to navigate and understand the plant and the data that's within. Here is a web-based interface showing quite a large 3D model, and we've been able to show and import massive 3D models, size of large onshore plants. We can navigate, pan, understand, and select multiple objects, as you'd expect from a 3D model navigator, and most importantly, select an information. And on selecting it, the information is then pulled from the AssetWise tool and brought forward into the interface. You'll also see on some of those vessels a graph and a pressure. That graph is taken from our operational analytics. It's time series data of how pressure has changed in that vessel over time, and it's showing the current pressure at the current time overlaid on top of it. Now, the truth is, and I think everybody would agree, that the idea of getting a 3D model into operations is not easy. It's not something that's commonly done. And certainly, most importantly, our existing assets, of which there are many, there is no 3D model, and to recreate that 3D model will cost a lot of money. And this is where reality modeling coming in. What you're seeing here, although I've stopped at a very bad point, is called a reality mesh. Reality mesh is a 3D representation of your plant. It was taken using photographs and some laser scans, and I have to admit this is not the best 3D mesh we've ever seen of a chemical plant, but we can only spend a short amount of time on site for this one. But where we come in unique as Bentley is not only the ability to create this 3D mesh, this reality mesh, but also, as you can see, to classify it. And here in our visual navigation tool, we've classified these items directly within the tool and then link them to the tags with an AssetWise. And when we click on them, we can access the documents and the data just like we could have done the 3D model. And what we're going to move on to is an example of that classification process. Here we're going to try and classify quite a difficult item, a pipe. We're going to make a drawing from the top view, a sort of a polygon around the pipe, and allow the system to automatically understand what's underneath it and then take its best guess at what the asset is. You'll see now that when he moves to the isometric view, it didn't quite understand because that pipe was captured onto, attached to risers and so on. You'll see that we're having to adjust the Z-axis until we capture just the pipe itself. And then once we've got the pipe, we can then connect it to a tag in the Alim world. So here he's choosing the class of tag that he wants to find. He's choosing a pipe, and then chooses the one that's immediately there and links it. Now, once that connection's made, he can select the pipe, and up comes the information directly from AssetWise about it. All of this comes with this idea of the model-centric view. Last of all, obviously because we're identifying these assets, they all have classes, they all have information. Here we're just using a very simple search by class, but of course if we were to do a search for, we're going to search a little bit simple here for a couple of containers, but those are the containers in the model, and we're able to select them and then view them within the model itself. So we've talked about the first step, the move from this idea of document and data discipline being two disparate entities requesting handover separately into the one information management concept, the true data-centric view, and how Alim can help there. Now we're moving into this idea of not only just pulling over the data, but asking for the graphics itself, the 3D model in its digital form, the PNIDs in their digital form, and even taking a model representation of your plant if you can't obtain that using reality meshes such as the one we can provide. Therefore, you can link all your information together in the visual reality that it exists. And where does that place you into this matrix? Right at that top right. You now have all the information. You've now got that digital twin that you were looking for to understand the information is up to date using all the business processes that Alim can provide and all the tools you have to hand. Let's have a recap. Hopefully, I've managed to persuade you that really information. Documents are really only there for reference, and therefore it is the essential part of handover. If we can move to a truly data-centric view, and this idea where we merge documents and data as one single information management concept and one discipline, where everybody understands that both are equally necessary, that's when you get the real benefits within operations. Alim, our own tool, provides that this way of getting this digital twin, mainly for the reason that the fact it can support all the many processes of information management and store all the information in one single system. Documents and data sit together in relationships. Alim supports both the management information, review, approve, and capturing the information, but also the business processes around it, like change management and inspections and condition management. Masto, I talked about that as a template on top of Alim to reduce any time and complexity about configuring the tool, and also providing any best practices that we believe are good within the oil, gas, chemical industry. And then I talked a little bit about the model-centric as the future, this move from this data-centric one information management to then adding the graphics and taking visual reality to really understand the site you have. That finishes off.
Hello.
Go on.
Yeah, Long.
Hi there.
Hello. Yeah, well done, Long. Thanks for this information. I think, from my own opinion, what I've seen so far, Alim, I think is a nice tool to have. All right, but I have a few questions which I need to clarify. First, I think I want to ask: is it hosted in the cloud, or is local server based? That is one of my questions. Then the second one, sorry, Caro is speaking, Egwari. If I may ask, what do you think that will make the operations staff make use of this tool every day in its day-to-day work? That's the second question. Then the third one, sorry, let me just bring them out for once. Yeah. Is there any possible interface with engineering design authoring tools? Any possible interface with engineering tools? Then the last one I have is what is the plan for the bundle? If we, let's say, a project wants to have this now, what is the plan? Is there any limit to what it can take? Let's say maybe number of tags or number of documents. Is there any limitation to that? I think those are my 4 questions. Thanks.
Okay. Let's start with the top one, which was the I'm jumping quickly so I can remember them all. You asked about whether it can be cloud-based. It is cloud-based today. That's what we call the managed services. It exists within the Azure platform, the Microsoft Azure platform, and as you saw, totally web-based. The only element that isn't web-based is where you get into the deep configuration of the tool, but everything else, the entire user-based experience, is all web-based and can be accessed from anywhere. So yes, it's very much a cloud-based.
Okay, so it has does it have a document vault where it resides, all the document, physical document can be stored?
Yes, the repositories, in fact we have a very flexible way in how the documents are stored. They should really be stored within the cloud. It's the easiest method, but actually repositories can be pointed to anywhere. You can have one or many repositories for your documents, multiple servers, but again, storing those in the cloud, obviously alongside the server, makes the best sense.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So, yeah. So the other one, as I mentioned, the bundle, does there any limitation to the number of tags it can accept, or?
That's right. That was your fourth question.
Yes.
So that was the first one. The fourth one you asked is about limitation.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there is a limitation. We haven't reached it yet. To give you an example, Crossrail, which is possibly one of our biggest projects, although there are some projects that are rapidly coming up to it. It had 1 million assets, 2 million documents within the one system. There's no doubt throughout the 6-year life cycle of that project, that was a project, hasn't yet got operational yet. So obviously with a project there's more information to churn, and so probably the area under most stress when you're in the project phase. But there's no doubt throughout that 6 years we had to improve the servers, but we never really reached a point where the system just couldn't handle it any longer. It's still the same system today as it was 6 years ago. So hopefully 2 million documents, 1 million assets is more than many of the sites that you've got there. Does that answer your question there?
Yeah, it's okay. So the last one is around the authoring to interface with any other design tools.
Okay, so there was actually one other you asked me. You asked me how would you use this day to day. There's various areas. If I were to split operations into three disciplines, I realise that's a massive oversimplification, but let's split them into three. First will be health safety, and that discipline. Using the tool, and especially the ability to sort of embed 3D models and reality models and the tools that surround it, the Bentley offer, you can then familiarize yourself with the plant and really understand where something is and why it's there and all the information around it. That really helps for health safety and so on. The other one is quite a large one, is the shutdown, turnaround and just general engineering discipline. Here it is incredibly important because the system, Alim, stores not only the operational data but also the design data and the drawings. It should be the one point of reference, the true source for all the engineering information for them to start designing on, including the graphics. So that's incredibly important, but also on top of that is the business process of change management. There is built within the tool this ability to capture changes, capture what is changing, all the information that is encapsulated into one entity, a change package, and then place it through a workflow. The beauty of that is that we create a copy of all the information, allowing the engineers to make as many changes as they like on the copy, not the as-built information, and that's always protected. So that's engineering. I'll get onto your tool set in a minute. The other one's the operational phase. It's the operational team itself, i.e. the day-to-day operators. Again, it's going back to that visual operations, the ability to visually see what you have, maybe in a 3D model or reality model, and then click and see information about. And mainly I'm talking about engineering design information. I'm not talking about condition management and so on. You can also see inspections and observations that are made. You can log actions and so on within the tool. That's all part of the day-to-day operational side of information management that the tool could be used for. It is not a replacement for SAP. It's not a replacement for the SCADA systems or the up to the second condition management systems. It is aimed to be the one source of all the information, truth, that is the key information for making large decisions, not the day-to-day tiny decisions. So that's the way I see it. It certainly is a tool to use day to day, and it sits alongside the the big operational tools that you would have. The last one you asked about the engineering tools. The tool itself is not designed to link directly to engineering tools. Bentley actually offer a separate tool that has the full integration, and it AssetWise connects to it. It's what we call the ProjectWise tool set. And basically what you can click within the AssetWise, this Alim tool, to pass to the ProjectWise tool set, and it allows all the engineering discipline to go and access those drawings. The reason we separate the two is that we don't want, even though they may be under change or replicated, we don't want engineering making day-to-day and collaborative decisions based on what we need as a controlled environment. So not only do we control it within the tool, but we then pass it into a separate repository to allow the engineers to go in. And that tool, that ProjectWise tools, has all kinds of engineering tool capabilities. We can talk to Intergraph, Viva, and so on within that ProjectWise tool. Okay. Hopefully that answers the 4 questions.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we have still 2 minutes to go, and a lot of people on the call, so I think there will be more questions. So
yeah,
please, people.
Olly, sorry, this Masto from Nigeria. Thanks for the presentation, and also Carol, thanks for the questions. I'm looking at. In view of the contract model that we do apply most of our capital projects, EPC, the role of the contractor in implementing this development, it looks like bringing the future to the present, because it's really a highly desired result that we see if we able to move further from the data-centric to model-centric. But I'm looking at the things that we do, the things that are done for us by the contractor, especially the EPC model. How do we bring in this into the contracting so that we could get more value from the work they do for us, having our information viewed from the design and the inceptions of the activities before the handover and operator phase. Just what your view in that direction is, how can get more value there?
Yeah, it is the most common question that happens, and easily the most difficult. It is all about getting that contract tight and at the start, and defining what you need as information right at the start of the project, whether it's brownfield or greenfield. It's because that defines what they're going to hand over. What we've done in the past, especially with the likes of Crossrail, is we've actually offered the academy within Bentley, where contractors come in and we educate them as to why information is needed. Because once they know why and they understand how important it is, then they tend to hand it over. So it's a mix of contractual, sadly, but it's also a mix of understanding and education as to why information is needed.
Okay, so looking at the time, let's thank the presenters for all they said and the questions they answered. If there are any more questions, please put them on email. So either directly to Live, and otherwise to me. That's fine too. I'll make sure that they will be answered. And again, thank you very much, guys, for your presentation. And have a good day.
Thank you all for your time. This was very informative on our end as well. So appreciate the good questions. And as you said, anything that comes up, please let us know.
Yeah, thanks, sir. Thanks, Olly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.